let's talk about it.
Hello and welcome back to a special episode of Thicc Radio, the podcast where we talk about gaining, feedism, and everything in their orbit. I'm James.
And I'm Tim, so let's get into it.
Tim?
Yes.
Happy Diwali, babe.
Happy Diwali.
Oh, what a wonderful day it is today. Now, for the listeners who do not know, Diwali is a cute little holiday that happens around this time every year. And we're really wanting the opportunity to explore that a bit today. I mean, Tim, we've started doing some holiday acknowledgement here and there with some different bits and pieces, but I mean, what do you think of when you think of Diwali?
Admittedly, I don't know a lot. We've done a little bit of research on it, and I believe that the spirit of the holiday revolves around. I know it's a Hindu festival of light, and it's supposed to symbolize the spiritual victory of light over darkness.
That's exactly it. So, yeah, I think we often think of in terms of like Judaic holidays, very like, oh, Easter, Jesus is born. Black Friday, Jesus dies, you know.
No, just wait a minute.
Wait, no.
Christmas, Jesus is born.
He's born at Christmas.
He died on Easter.
I've been out of this shit too long, people. Anyway, born at Christmas, dies at Easter, resurrected at Easter. You know, so you kind of get the whole life cycle that way. But Diwali is a little bit of because it isn't just one day, right? It goes for a couple of days. And it's kind of over that period that you see that kind of celebration of good versus evil, light over darkness, very, very bad, right? So I think that's quite cool. And I think Diwali is most commonly referred to as the Festival of Light, you know? So you've got all that wonderful, that use of henna that people will do at the time. People will decorate their homes. People do all sorts, really. And I think this is a really cool opportunity to, much like we do with our regular culture eps, branch out and start looking at holidays around the world. One, because we've got listeners, you know, people who this is their life and we want to own that and celebrate it with you. But also, too, because bitches eat food during holidays. And us bitches, we love to eat food. So here we are today to do the talking. So, what we said before, Diwali, holiday, light over darkness, very that. And we were talking about decorations. People, of course, will put, because it's the Festival of Light, candles, oil lamps, I think they're called diyas. They'll put it all over their homes, their temples and workspaces. And I think because Diwali has come from this like South Asian continent, there's a couple of different streams of faith who celebrate Diwali or some variation of it. So I believe from speaking to some Hindu friends, some of them have like an oil bath at dawn or each day of the festival. That's their way of basking in and like following ritual for Diwali.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, as well, I think people do things like they'll light fireworks. We talked as well about decorations. They'll do like Rangoli designs, or like
what is a Rangoli design?
It's sort of those typical, like it's not quite a mandal pattern, but you know, it kind of tessellates a little bit outwards. So where you see things like that, and jalas as well. That's another type of pattern that you'll see throughout. So a jala, by contrast, is something where it's more kind of like bunting, almost.
Oh, okay.
But creative bunting, that's where you see that. As mentioned before, so it's connected to a number of different religious events, right? And we're talking about the kind of spectrum of different histories. So in some, it's attached to Rama returning to Ayodhya with his wife Sita and her brother Lakshmana after defeating the demon king Ravana.
Okay.
It can also be associated with Lakshmi, the goddess of prosperity, and Ganesha, the god of wisdom and the remover of obstacles. So, you know, we can already see like there's a very firm theme of, you know, triumph, glory, light, positivity, you know, very that. And it can also be connected to a number of other deities: Vishnu, Krishna, Durga, Shiva, Kali, Hanuman, Kubera, Yama Yami, Danvantari, or Vishvakarman. So I just feel like with so many different deities that it could be attached to, it makes sense that Diwali becomes not like a not like a hodgepodge of things, right? But it's understandable why Diwali represents so much to so many, and it makes sense why all the kind of themes and notes around Diwali are so light and so airy and so kind of you get that kind of mental image. Everything is up.
It kind of reminds me of the Celtic festival of Lunasa.
Yeah, because
Um,
tell us about that a bit.
I don't know a ton about Lunasa because like my knowledge of the Celtic ancient religions is not solid, but like Lunasa is the day that the sun dies.
Okay.
Like August 1st is like, because obviously as the season moves on, the days are going to become shorter, even if it's just by a couple of seconds or minutes. But they saw it as that's when the sun dies and it goes into the underworld, and then it's brought back on the winter solstice.
Right.
So I know that Lunasa is about bonfires. So it's another festival of light, and it's about dancing and eating, and pretty much like any other religious celebration. It's all about food and dancing and merriment.
And all that good stuff. I mean, I love that. I love hearing that. It's really interesting to contrast these different. I don't know. It's interesting how different faiths around the world can have different interpretations of similar notions and concepts, and it's also just quite wonderful to just see how people bring it to the fore. Like you say, with Lunasa, there's bonfires and there's all that typical stuff. Similar kind of themes happening with Diwali, with light and with brightness. So
Mhm.
I want to ask you here, and I know I think we talked about this on the podcast before. You did a 23andMe. Have we talked about
I
this?
did, yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we might have said something. I don't know if I did, but I actually found out what my true genetic mix is, because for years I did not know. My mom's side of the family is descended from Eastern European, Polish, and that's how they've always identified. So growing up, my mom said that we were Polish, which she was like fifth generation at that point. So it's the language didn't carry down. Maybe some of the food did. Maybe some of like the folk traditions carried down, but it wasn't exactly something that I felt majorly connected to. And then on my dad's side, no one really knew anything at all. It was like the family members that you talked to all had different stories, nothing lined up, and no one was entirely sure, because if you go back far enough in American history, like record keeping was not that great. And if you lived in a community of color, the record keeping was even worse because the government didn't really care. They would come and they'd do the census, they'd knock on the door and ask how many people live here, what are their professions, yada yada. But they would just, the census taker, who was almost always white, would look at brown skinned people and not know the difference between one and another. They wouldn't be able to go like, oh, that person's probably from India, that person's probably from Central America. They would just see brown skin and they go, yeah, everybody here is black. So
Wow.
there just wasn't any, there wasn't sufficient records to go back and find out. And then when I did the DNA test, the biggest surprise I got was I was 12% South Asian.
Mm.
And I brought that up to my dad's side of the family. And my grandmother, my dad's mom, she's she's a very set in her ways type of woman. She
Mm.
will not budge on anything that she believes in. So when I told her that the South Asian obviously came from my dad's side of the family, she's like, well, I don't know if I'd believe that. It's genetic science, for Christ's sake. But yeah, that's how I found out that I'm part South Asian. But unfortunately, I was not aware of it growing up, because I think if my mother had been aware of it, she would have tried to incorporate elements of that culture into my upbringing, but
Mm.
she didn't know. So I was not raised with any cultural awareness of it.
And I know you've been on a little bit of a journey recently, sort of questioning like how much you want to engage with it, and again, questions of, shall we say, appropriation. But
That's one of my biggest insecurities around it, is I'm afraid that because I was not raised in that culture, because no one made me aware of it, and no one like taught me anything about it, that it kind of feels now like if I go and try to learn about it, I'm trying to appropriate it, and I realize that that's my own hang up, but
Hmm.
it's kind of hard not to feel insecure about that because I feel like a total outsider.
Well, I think one of the wonderful things that I know of growing up in where I have in the world where there is a larger population of South Asian people is that, yeah, there's probably something to be said about appropriation, but I think South Asian culture is designed in such a way that it is celebratory and it does bring people in. And again, to center on food for a second, this is a big part of it. Questions around appropriation, not to say, again, not to say that conversation doesn't happen, but people are certainly more open. If you're expressing a genuine desire to engage, for the most part, people aren't going to be weird about that. People are going to be like, great, fabulous, come on in. There's an extra plate. Come on to the table, join us. Very that, right? And I think this
Mhm,
is, again, one of the wonderful things about talking about Diwali. And I think when I reflect on the gainer community, sometimes we can all feel like islands. We can all feel separate to one another. And the beauty about something like Diwali means, you don't need to worship a deity to
mhm,
celebrate Diwali. You can come and be with people and celebrate community, and that's as equal a part of the opportunity to be there with others as anything else. So
mhm,
take that opportunity this Diwali. If you have the opportunity to share a meal with someone, to be with others, absolutely do that. Messages abound.
mhm. Okay, so Diwali is one of the most prominent holidays that's observed by Hindus, but apparently Buddhists and Jains and Sikhs also observe it. So, what have you learned about these particular faiths and how they interact with the holiday of Diwali?
So I gotta say, it was a really interesting opportunity again to do some research on this one because people kind of come at this a few different ways, right? So, for example, like the Jains celebrate Diwali as the final liberation of Mahavira, right? Which is obviously a big moment for that line of faith. And I think for the Sikhs, they don't call it Diwali. I think from memory, it's called Bandi Chor Divas, I believe.
Mhm,
I think it's meant to be the release of Guru Hargobind from a Mughal prison. So that's a more like that one's more rooted in reality. So again, it's people treating different things as need be. I think
mhm,
I think Niwa Buddhists are celebrated by worshipping Lakshmi. We mentioned that before. Um, as the goddess of prosperity, with Ganesha, the god of wisdom and the remover of obstacles. So that's like the Nuwa Buddha side of things. And I think the Hindus of Eastern India and Bangladesh, especially, celebrated by worshipping Kali. Um, so and something else that's really interesting when you look at the kind of broader aspect of faith. I know we mentioned community. A big part of the festival, a big part of the festival is remembering your ancestors. So in a way, it also bears some similarity to Dia de los Muertos for Mexican people, where people come together with friends and family to celebrate memories. So I want to ask you here, Tim, and obviously, as you've expressed, you haven't had this kind of heritage in your life necessarily. Um, but what are some of your strongest familial memories around the holidays?
Christmas and Thanksgiving. Um, that was always a big. My mother always made a really big deal out of Christmas, and actually, I've been feeling like I don't dislike Christmas now, but as an adult, I have no children. I really don't have anything to like. I have nieces and nephews and all that, but yeah, I'm not in their homes decorating with them, and like I'll go over to like my sister's house for Christmas dinner or whatever. But like, I just don't get into Christmas anymore. But really big memories surrounding that particular holiday.
It's really lovely. I think definitely the same, and I'll imagine for many of our viewers it'll be kind of the same, right? Like Easter's a holiday. That's not really like a celebratory holiday, let's say. Same thing like Valentine's, but I don't know, maybe for some people it's Halloween, maybe families throw parties or go trick-or-treating as groups. For me, it was definitely Christmas. It was the one day of the year where everyone stopped being assholes for the day.
Really? Because my family didn't stop being assholes even on holidays.
No, that was kind of the trick point there. Like, I say they stopped being assholes, they just.
They just learned how to temper their attitudes a little bit more.
Yeah, ever so slightly, you know. And in terms of happy memories around that day, you know, it's just a day to be around people. It was always food. But, you know, in Australia, Christmas is a 110-degree day. It's
Oh,
boiling fucking hot. So it's height of summer. You know what I mean? You don't want to be eating a full Christmas turkey on.
yeah, I think that's something that people that live in the northern hemisphere forget, that in the southern hemisphere, when we're having winter, y'all are having summer.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something else to really be cognizant of regarding holidays, because again, moving from Australia to the UK, everything's opposite schedule here. It's a very weird experience to have grown up without a white Christmas, but all the motifs and all the music and all the food was always about having a white Christmas. So the first time I had a white Christmas, I was like, it's Christmas, but it's cold. I've never had this
Do,
before, but simultaneously it's familiar.
do you think that that's due to American influence in Australia? Because you'd think that in a country where it doesn't snow around Christmas, and yet you try, like, everything, all the decorations try to emulate this idea of winter,
Mhm.
but you guys aren't experiencing winter. Do you think that's like American influence?
Literally no one else's influence that it would have been.
Oh,
Well,
okay. I was just curious. I figured the answer was yes, but
it's okay. It's okay. Conversations around Americentrism, you know, it's like you'll have a lot more influence and a lot more, shall we say, on the planet than
mm.
maybe what you recognize sometimes. So that's okay. It's good to ask questions. So I do want to ask, since we are talking about Diwali and we've talked a little bit about your heritage, what has been the most surprising aspect so far about even just asking the questions around your
Yeah,
heritage?
it's been that, asking the questions and just discovering it, that it was there, and kind of when I got that DNA test done, right? Like, yeah, there was that significant portion from South Asia, but then I was basically ticking off every continent except Australia,
Hmm.
you know, and I'm like, I didn't know, and so that was really surprising, was to find that out, and now I'm kind of, and it's been a slow pace, but I'm trying to understand the different components that make up me, the different cultures that influenced who I am, I guess.
I was a bit curious, right? Because I sort of wondered to myself, like, what can the gaming community learn from Hinduism, right? Because obviously it's a kind of religious idea that, you know, you sort of think like, oh, it's around peace and prosperity, but like actually, like, what are the tenets of
Of
Hinduism?
Hinduism.
Yeah.
The concepts that I'm familiar with are the concept of Vedic karma, right?
Mhm.
So, like, the things that you do in this life kind of compile into your karmic cycle. So, like, say if you've lived a disreputable existence, you might come back as what is termed a lesser being, which could be, not a human, possibly an animal of some kind. Or if you've gone really far in your karmic cycle and you've built up all of this good karma, then you could be reincarnated in an elevated state. Um, and then I'm familiar with some of the gods, like Ganesh, who is often depicted as being pretty portly.
Mm.
Usually has a big round belly, but and has the head of an elephant. A little bit familiar with um, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, which is like sort of the three major ones. Like, Brahma creates, Vishnu upholds, Shiva destroys.
I believe so.
And then I'm familiar with Kali, the goddess of destruction.
Mm.
She's pretty popular among neo-pagans.
I can imagine. Um, so again, having done a little bit of research on this, I know that there are kind of four, I think it's like four goals in the human life. So the first is karma, which isn't karma with the R. This is just karma, which is like the pursuit of pleasure, right?
Hmm.
You've got artha, which is the pursuit of material success. Dharma, which is leading a just and good life, and moksha, which is enlightenment. And I think it's the combination of those four that frees a person from suffering and unites that individual soul with Brahman, who you'd mentioned before. So
Hmm.
again, it's interesting that kind of cyclic uh about to say kind of like a quest line. I haven't had a religion too long. No, it's like, but it's interesting that kind of like cyclic nature that kind of occupies Hinduism that, you know, is present in Judaism a lot as well, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
interesting to compare and contrast and see where we've come from and where we're going and all that good stuff, you know?
Well, I mean, all religions influence each other, even if there are people within that religion that don't want to admit it.
Hmm.
You know, Catholicism, like I was raised as a Catholic, right? And so like I had all that drummed into my head, the prayers that we say every time that we're in mass, the specific psalms that they read, the specific passages of the gospels that they read, the rituals of communion and confession and anointing of the sick and all that. And 90% of what they have they stole from pagans. So like,
Hmm.
yeah.
Somehow that doesn't surprise me at all. Now, I was going to ask, as much as you probably haven't celebrated Diwali before specifically, based on what you know of Diwali, what would you want to do to celebrate the day?
Well, I definitely like the whole the fact that it's a festival of lights, and I feel like it because it butts up so close to Christmas. It's like go ahead and put out all the decorations of you can string your house with lights, which is probably what I'll do. Um, Surround the interior with candles or lanterns or anything that glows that makes something look pretty. Obviously the Christmas tree, which doesn't have anything to do with Diwali, but I mean it's still a tree that has lights on it, so
Yeah, I think what I would want to most engage with is that kind of local community, be around people and get the chance to not only see the lights and take some gorgeous photos, because if you all Google Diwali, if you've never seen it, the people go out, right? It looks like the daytime at nighttime. It's beautiful to see. But what do you think I would most be wanting to get involved in a holiday like this?
the food.
The food, bitch. The motherfucking food, bitch. Every goddamn time. So listen, I will say, Tim and I went out and we got some little treaty treats to try, right? And I believe
Yeah.
it's referred to as mithrai, like treats specific to, the holiday with Diwali, but also just to enjoy, right? So
Yeah.
I went and I got some rasgulla, and I think you got, was it laddu?
Yeah, laddu.
So rasgulla is basically milk curd balls done in like
Mhm.
a simple sugar syrup kind of situation.
Yeah.
Big dumplings, right?
Okay.
What was your laddu? What was that?
Laddu, they're about the size of like a chocolate truffle. They're about that size, and they're made from chickpea. And I think to me it tasted like they were sweetened with honey, but I don't think honey is one of the ingredients. I know cardamom is one of the ingredients. I believe almonds are another. So that could have been where the sweetness was coming from the almonds.
Okay.
Um, it was very subtle. It was a subtle sweetness. It was not overpowering. It wasn't cloying like some sweets can be.
Yeah,
Um,
I found I found that too. A much more pleasant flavor experience to consume.
yeah, yeah,
Now, mind you, I think because it was milk curd, like when you bite into it, it's got like that kind of little rubbery squeak.
like a cheese curd.
Think like halloumi, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
that kind of little moment. So the mouthfeel wasn't like very favorable for me, but all in all, not terrible. And as of course, these things being store bought, I imagine if you were there at like a Diwali festival center, there's a vendor selling fresh made whatchamacallit. I reckon
Yeah,
that would taste 10 times better, you know?
yeah. Like I said, mine didn't taste bad at all. Like it was quite pleasant. It was a little crumbly, and I'm sure it's meant to be crumbly because again, it's chickpea flour.
Hmm.
So it had kind of the consistency of like, have you ever had not like not dry tofu, but like tofu as it usually would come, where it's like moist and it's crumbly and it falls apart. It was a lot like that.
Mm. Yeah, definitely more of that kind of a texture. So for me, I'll be honest, I'll give it like a 6.5 out of 10. You know, what
Yeah,
did you say about your laddu? Same.
I'd give it a 7. I would.
Same.
It's literally the only thing that I didn't care for was the crumbly nature of it. Like I've said time and time again, I'm a texture person when it comes to food. And like if the texture is strange or like gives a bad mouth feel, it's usually like it's not that I don't want to spit it out or anything or say it's gross, because it wasn't gross. It was very good, but it just was different from what I'm used to eating.
No, that makes sense. And look, again, it was sort of the same for me, you know. But, you know, that was us participating a little bit in Diwali this year. So there you go. We want to encourage you, dear listener, if you see some events happening around your local area, if you have the chance to try any treats, go and do that. And if you have any thoughts and feelings on them, write to us at thiccradio@gmail.com. But, Tim, I think that brings us to the end of our special episode for today. Thank you so much for your time. Always a pleasure.
Of course.
But
of course,
that's it for the week. Well, for the day. I always get confused. You know, like when we do the special one, I'm always like, is it a week, a day? That's it for today. We're wrapping up. We're wrapping up here now. So yes, wrapping up here now. Please remember to like and subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave us a good review. If you liked this episode, the podcast, or just us in general, share it with your friends and encourage them to tune in. You can find me on Instagram at BeefyFrat and Stuff and Show at stannnum.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, and BeefyFrat at ThiccMouse. You can also look us up on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Thicc Radio, or at our website at www.podpage.com/Thicc Radio. If you want to submit a voice note, you can find the link in the show notes. And if you have any questions or ideas for episodes, you can reach us at thiccradio@gmail.com. So until next time, bye, Fats.
Bye, Fats.
Let's talk about it.
Thicc Radio is a Patreon and Enter app podcast produced by Stan and Vicky Mouse.
Mixed and mastered by stannnum.
Our artwork is provided by Lokitu.
Our theme song is provided by Spotify.